hot topic. We're setting a record this week, actually. There's 7 countries represented in this upcoming NASCAR Cup Series race at Watkins Glen. And so in light of Daniel Kvyat's recent Cup debut and the upcoming starts planned by F1 champion Kimi Räikkönen and 24 Hours of Le Mans winner Mike Rockenfeller, some in the sport are questioning NASCAR's approval process for the Cup Series. Now, this started with a tweet from Fox Sports' Bob Pockrass, letting it be known that Rockenfeller plans to run the Charlotte Roval in the Cup Series later this year with Spire Motorsports. He's now, of course, also on the entry list for Watkins Glen this weekend, in addition to Kimi Räikkönen with Trackhouse Racing in the Project 91 car. Now, a tweet was sent out from Couch Racer Shop, which is operated by Brett Griffin, and I assume most of the time the Twitter account is as well, saying no truck or Xfinity starts needed to start a Cup race. Got it. Now, later on in the thread, a fan pointed out that Jordan Taylor's plans to make his Cup debut were put on hold a couple of years ago. The fan thought the reason was because it was going to be on an oval. Of course, Taylor, coming from sports cars, has a lot more road course experience. But Taylor actually replied and said it was for the Daytona road course. They said I needed a few more Rolex 24s under my belt to get approved. So we'll bring both of you back in here now. And I guess, Josh, we'll go to you first, because I know the European system and the FIA super license system is very strict. There's a very strict ladder the drivers have to work their way up. Do you think NASCAR needs a more formal ladder for evaluating drivers before their Cup debuts, or should they continue to look at drivers on a case-by-case basis?
I think there's 2 points there as well. The first point is with this Project 91, I can't remember the actual name of it, the project that's bringing all the series talents into NASCAR for one-off races. I think we all said as well, it's a great idea to promote both racing in Europe and racing in NASCAR to one another. That's a great idea, and it's a great strategy. But I do agree with you on the basis that there needs to be a process where you're not just throwing drivers in for a race in the Cup Series and then they just disappear again, or they come back in any time they like, where they could disrupt the championship, where they could disrupt people putting in better results of the season. I personally think, a bit like what we have here, they should make starts in trucks or in the Xfinity Series as well, maybe even ARCA, just to see if they're competitive enough and they like the format, they like the tracks that we race on in NASCAR, and then they can go and race at some point later on in the season, or even the season after, in a Cup Series in that Project 91 car. I don't agree with the fact that it seems like what everybody else has to go through, which is to go through, the written permission for the license for NASCAR as well. I've got it up here as well. They have to go apply for the license, fill out 4 different options, make sure you've completed this, and this, ticked off every box. I think for these special one-off races, NASCAR should have a test day where they have that car. You go out. If you are setting a lap time that is inside 7 seconds of the top driver's pole time from that year, then you're allowed to compete in the race. A bit like Formula 1 has the 107% rule, so that we don't have cars in the grid that are too slow and could cause problems. I think it should be the same for NASCAR with these drivers coming in, because what's stopping Mario Andretti getting in a NASCAR now and going out on the track? Because even he said, someone's going to have to stop me one day getting in these cars. And he's too slow. And what's stopping them? Nobody. He could take away a driver, cause a big accident. That's the basis. If you let people from different series just hop in the car, you are opening so much floodgate as to drama, contact, crashes, and things like that. You're literally putting yourself in a difficult position because you haven't vetted them properly. I would make them do a test event. I know Raikkonen did one a few days ago at Virginia, as well, International Raceway, and looked quite good. Don't think Kvyat did one. I don't think Rockenfeller's done one either. They've just turned up on the weekend. So I think they definitely need a vetting process, and I think you should start in a junior series first off, and then some point in there you get it.
I'm going to pull this tweet up here because I think Pockrass would say, yeah, there you go. Rockenfeller was also at the IR getting in the Action Express car for his driver orientation next-gen test after Kimi Räikkönen is done with his. So Rockenfeller was getting that, but I believe you're correct. I know Kvyat was doing some late model tests at Hickory, so it's not like he was brand new into a stock car straight away. But Brandon, I guess we'll follow up with a follow-up question here. You, of course, can take both parts of this question, but we are talking a couple of ex-F1 drivers, and obviously Kimi is a world champion, and Rockefeller's won the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well, and you could maybe say there's even a little bit more overlap, not entirely, of course, but between a closed cockpit sports car and a stock car. He's won Le Mans. Should those guys be exempt from needing to make ARCA starts or Truck Series starts and pedaling around there in the lower series when clearly we know what they can do behind the wheel of a race car based on their previous motorsports achievements? Or do you think it should be across the board? Everybody should have to make at least one start in the lower series to prove themselves before we let them into a cup car.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea as a nobody really that F1 drivers and ex Le Mans drivers can just hop into the cockpit at the cup level and at least on a one-off event and things like that. My mind really goes back to Juan Pablo Montoya just deciding one day, you know what, I'm just going to the Cup Series, and that he did. But I also recall that they also had starts in the Busch Series as well. You think of Dario Franchitti going over to NASCAR. He did things in the Busch Series, the Nationwide Series as well. So it wasn't just Cup efforts that they made, those that transitioned from that world of motorsport to NASCAR. And so there definitely is something to be said about looking at it with a case-by-case basis. But when it comes to F1 drivers and Le Mans drivers, they may have some liberty kind of depending on who they are. I'm still kind of on the fence about it. But Joshua, you do bring up a lot of good points.
Yeah, just on the F1 drivers, they've got to be, I think we can excuse world champions, i.e. Raikkonen. But there's some racing drivers that have raced in F1 who have been absolutely terrible as well. And I think that's something as well that NASCAR shouldn't set the precedent just saying, oh, ex-F1, yeah, you're fine. Andre Lotterer is an ex-F1 driver. He did one race and did one lap of a Grand Prix in Belgium before the Caterham retired in the pit lane. He's technically a Formula One racing driver. Would you let him in the NASCAR because he's an F1 driver? No. We also what Montoya did. We also what Villeneuve has done. Villeneuve is the 1997 world champion, multiple Indy 500 winner. Look what he did in this year. He was tailing around at the back as well, and he was embarrassing himself in the Daytona 500. So I think we need the test. I would still say you need the test. NASCAR need to officially do that as a test, not just the drivers going there of free will to test the cars. NASCAR needs to make it an official test and say, if you are quick enough to this time and you pass our tests, then you can race. Because I can guarantee that the FIA wouldn't let anybody in now. They wouldn't let a NASCAR driver in the F1 car just because they're a NASCAR driver. They would have to pass the tests. They'd have to have the super license points. I think NASCAR should be no different because we've been saying all season that there's such great talent in the Xfinity and in the trucks and the NARCA that are struggling to get seats because their seats and their races get nicked by everyone in the Cup Series going down the order. And now we're seeing people just hopping into the Cup Series that don't deserve to be there half the time. I'm all okay for one-off events, but if it's going to keep happening like this, you need to vet them. You really do. And if you want to come in and make a permanent start that isn't a one-off, like Rockefeller's doing, where they're coming in at Watkins Glen, then I think if that is more than one event, you need to race in other series as well. You need to have this consistency where you prove yourself to be on this grid, that you're not going to cause a danger and you're not going to spoil the show and you're not going to spoil the title hopes, because we've got this ridiculous system, yes, with the playoffs that we've got to qualify for. And that's it. You've got to qualify for the playoffs. It could spoil it. And it's not right. It's definitely not right.
Well, and Brandon, I remember you were bringing up Montoya and Franchitti. Those were guys that were making the transition right when I was just starting to get into the sport. And I remember Montoya running the ARCA race at Talladega and running the Homestead race in 2006 to get approved for the Daytona 500 the following year. And Franchitti as well, Indy 500 winner, IndyCar champion. Even he was running some truck and bush races to get prepared for that. I see our Grid Tonight co-hosts are in the chat room, so we'll catch up on their comments here. Kobe Lambus saying NASCAR's approval process is very inconsistent, but I think F1 and DTM champions should get a free pass to race a Cup on a road course. The test day is a new rule added this year, and I agree. And I think this goes back to what you were saying as well, Josh. I think there's a big difference between Kimi Räikkönen coming in for a one-off straight into the Cup Series and I hate to throw him under the bus. Maybe I don't actually, but Nikita Mazepin running the Daytona 500 in a top team car there. I think, obviously we can see that there's some differences there. And, I think Kimi, not too many people. And if you want to, go all the way back, Kimi actually does technically have a couple of NASCAR starts on ovals as well. He did a couple of races in the Truck Series, one in the Truck Series, one in the Xfinity Series in 2011 at Charlotte. So it's not like he has absolutely zero stock car experience throughout his career. Adam saying this race at Watkins Glen is going to be a good one. Completely agree with that. There's a lot of big names in the motorsports world coming in for this race. Kobe adding, it was super disrespectful to tell Jordan Taylor he needed a few more Rolex 24s. How can you say that to a GM factory driver and someone who has won major endurance races around the world? And this is my big issue, I think, when it comes to NASCAR's approval process here. And, I took some heat for this, especially based on what actually happened in the Truck Series race at Talladega last year. But I will still stand by when Jennifer Jo Cobb was supposed to make her Truck Series debut for Rick Ware Racing. I'm not saying that NASCAR should have approved her or shouldn't have denied her, but my argument was there was no precedent to do that when you look at what NASCAR had previously approved for drivers that had less experience. Jennifer Jo Cobb is a veteran in the Truck Series who had a sixth-place finish on a super speedway before, and you want to go back to Talladega, just the previous year's race. I know she was off strategy, obviously, but she ran up front and led a pack of a few backmarker trucks to actually lead 16 laps in that race, I believe. And I think back a couple of years earlier, I think it was, again, don't want to throw him under the bus entirely, but Tanner Berryhill, I think, made his Cup debut with Obica Racing at Phoenix in the playoffs. If we're going to allow that, why are we not allowing somebody that's been in the sport for almost 2 decades in Jennifer Jo Cobb to make her Cup Series debut at Talladega in a Rick Ware racing car, which, but again, don't want to, Rick Ware is somebody that's trying to do the best with what he can, but she's probably not going to be running up at the front of the pack, causing the big one. She's probably going to be, towards the back end of a draft out there logging laps, gaining experience. I didn't see a problem with that based on other things that NASCAR had approved in the past. And then we find out that Jordan Taylor didn't get approved. Again, one thing to talk about doing it on an oval, but you're telling a sports car, multiple race winner, somebody who's a GM factory driver that he's not going to be allowed to race the Daytona road course. I mean, what more experience is he going to get from a couple more Rolex 24s that he doesn't already have? So there's some inconsistencies. I think NASCAR has not approved drivers that they should have approved, and at the same time approved drivers that they probably shouldn't have approved in the past. So I think what we're just looking for is maybe not something as strict as an FIA super license point system, but something that can still give us some clarity on what it takes to earn a Cup Series opportunity in NASCAR.